Hey everyone, welcome back to another video tutorial on AWS Lightsail hosting and WordPress tips. Today I'll show you 5 tips for a basic configuration after installing a Blake instance of WordPress. These are the first items I usually tend to configure on a WordPress instance before I get started developing on it. And they are important towards making your site a little bit more secure and reliable. And I recommend them before starting any development effort on WordPress. Now, most of these steps can be done with a plugin, but today I wanted to show you how to perform these steps without the use of a plugin in case you don't want to increase your plugin footprint. So without further ado, let's get started. The 5 items that we will change today in this video are: number 1, disable XML-RPC. Number 2, disable comments and trackbacks. Number 3, disable the file editor. Number 4, disable the publication of your WordPress version. And number 5, we will change the default username using the WordPress CLI. I will have the timestamps for each of these 5 tips down in the description below, so if you want to skip around, you're welcome to do so. The files that we will be modifying in this video will be your functions.php file as part of your theme, the wp-config.php file, and the htaccess file. I will do the video using SSH, an SSH client into the server, but if you have a different way of accessing these files and modifying them, then please use that way. So let me open up an SSH client. And the first tip, which is to disable XML-RPC. For those of you that don't know what this feature does, this basically allows remote or programmatic access to your content through REST APIs. This is useful if you intend to push your content or publish your content to external applications like maybe a mobile app or another website or another web application. But if you don't intend to use this feature, then it's always a best practice to turn it off. So to turning it off, there are 2 files that we could do it through. One is the htaccess. We can deny access to the XML-RPC.php file. And then the second way would be to do it through your functions.php file. So I will show you both of those here. So SSH or get access to your files. Now I'm on the Bitnami installation of WordPress. So they do htaccess implementation a little bit differently. Their htaccess is stored in a configuration file. So typically in your WordPress root, this is our WordPress root. Typically in this location, you should see a .htaccess file, and you can just modify that there. But for Bitnami, they've moved that file into a conf folder, and there's an htaccess.conf file. So we will modify that. And we will scroll down to the bottom, and here, and after their configuration, we will add this code. So all of these commands and code will be available on the web hosting for beginners.net website. So you can just copy and paste it from there. So what we will do here is paste this. And you'll see here what this does is it defines the files, which is xml-rpc.php. And then it performs a deny and then allow. The reason we want to do this is we first deny from all. But if you had an external web application that has a static IP address, you can actually allow from these IP address locations. So you can actually make some exceptions. In our case, we will not need that. So you can just remove it and then save the file. And you should be good to go. The second way you can disable XML-RPC is by adding code to your functions.php file. So we'll do that now. So head on over to the theme, the active theme for your website, and open up the functions.php file. Okay, so in your functions.php file, you can add this code anywhere in the file. I'll just add it at the top here for the video. Insert. And for some reason, when I pasted it, it wanted to comment out my code. So we'll just uncomment this real quick. Okay, so what this does is it XML-RPC enabled. It'll return that as false. And then it also had the X ping back to the header as well. So this code will disable XML-RPC using the functions.php file. Now, tip number 2, let me go ahead and save this. Now, tip number 2 is to disable the comments and trackbacks. This can be done using the WordPress admin. So we'll go ahead and log into the WordPress admin. Okay, so you're logged into your WP admin. What you'll want to do is go over to settings and then discussion. And you want to turn off trackbacks or comments. Now, if you intend to run your website as a blog and you really you want to have commenting or some sort of an engagement with your visitors, then you could leave the comments turned on and then maybe tighten up the commenting feature using some of these options right here. However, I would probably suggest maybe turning it off anyways. And if you do want people to comment on your blog post or your content, then you could use something like an external service like Facebook comments or Discourse or some external tool and then integrate that into your website. They may have better ways to fight spam and get more reliable engagement out of your website than the default feature that's in WordPress. So I would turn these off right here, maybe even turn off the top one. So turning these off will disable comments and trackbacks on your website. If you have an existing website and you do this, you'll likely have a lot of posts or pages that still will have that feature turned on. The change that we just made in the discussion panel only applies to newer content. Older content, you have to still manually turn that off. So if you go over to your post and you want to do that, you would basically just go to your existing post, edit that, and turn off or uncheck both of these boxes right here and update. And you do that to all of your posts. So that covers tip number 2. Tip number 3 is to disable the file editor. Now, when you install WordPress by default, many times a feature called theme editor is always turned on, which is right here. And practically, you will never use this, and you shouldn't use this because many consider this as a security vulnerability in WordPress. Maybe some installations of WordPress have this turned off by default, but this is turned on. And with this feature, you can modify your theme's files, which through the browser, which probably has a security risk in its own. So always turn this off. And to do that, what we will do is go over into our wp-config.php file. So let's head on over there. So here we are in our wp-config.php file. Scroll down to anywhere before where it says do not modify anything below that. But anywhere above here, you can insert this line of code. And this will disable the file editor feature. So come over here and insert this. This is a define, disallow file edit, and set that to true, and save this. You never want this to be turned on. So now when you come back into your WP admin, here we go. And then that option is now not available through the WP admin. The 4th tip will be to disable the WordPress version from being displayed. So this is a good tip here because you don't want to always let people know if they're looking through your code or looking through your page source You don't want them to know what version of WordPress you're using, or if you can, even remove any kind of indication that you're using WordPress. It just gives them another, if it's a malicious user, it gives them enough information to know how to attack your website. So I would always turn this off. So what we would do is come here and go back to our SSH window, and we will go into your functions.php file. So here we will paste this line of code. And this basically removes WordPress generator information. Save the file, and that should be done with tip number 4. Now the last tip, we don't modify any files, but it's a WordPress CLI, command line interface command that we will run. When you install WordPress using a single click or one click process, kind of like what we just did here, which is with a Lightsail Bitnami blueprint, a lot of the times those one-click installs actually create an admin user by default. In our case, Bitnami creates a user called user as your administrator user. And it's always a good practice to change that username because everybody knows what that user is. And so that gives them a way to try to figure out how to hack into your website. So it's always a good practice to change that username. A couple of ways to do that. First is you could just basically log into your WP admin and go to users and add a brand new user, and then delete the admin user that was created by the one-click install. But if that's not possible for some reason, you could do the same activity through the WordPress CLI. There's also a plugin called Username Changer that you can install. But since we were doing all of this without a plugin, I'm going to show you how to do it using the WP CLI. So let's go ahead and go on to our SSH command, our SSH terminal. And what we will do is type this command here. So what this does is we do sudo WP, which is the WP CLI, allow root, and then we run a database query to update the WP users table and modify the login name for user to what we want it to be, which is what I'm renaming it to is Mukesh. So if I run this, it will now have modified the default user with the login name of Mukesh. And if I come back to my WP admin and I try to click anywhere, it's going to ask me to log in again. And so because my username changed. So now instead of user, I can use Mukesh and that same password that we had, and you should be able to log in. Again, this can also be done easily with a plugin called Username Changer. And if you want to do that instead, you could do that. You could also just create a new user and then delete the old user, like I mentioned before as well. There are many useful commands using the WP CLI. So if you'd like to see a video on WordPress CLI, then please put that comment in below. And with that, those were the 5 tips that I wanted to show you today. I hope you found them useful. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. If you have any issues with these tips, put those down in the comments below, and I will try my best to answer them. If you have your own set of tips that you run through before starting WordPress development, put those down in the comments below so you can share it with everyone. I may even do videos on them. So if you have more tips than the 5 that I showed you today, let me know. And don't forget to check out all my other videos that I've done around web hosting, around setting up Lightsail, cPanel, and a lot of various other ways to use WordPress and the Lightsail platform. So check out those videos, those playlists on my channel. Comment on any of them if you have any trouble or questions. I'll try my best again to answer them. And until the next video, take care.